Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Art Podcast. I'm your host, Art Robbins, and it's great to have you join us. The Leadership Art Podcast showcases everyday leadership in action. Each episode features insightful conversations with industry leaders who lead with purpose. Here, you will discover practical insights, powerful lessons, and everyday inspiration to elevate your own impact, whether you are leading now or preparing to step up. We want to inspire you to be the best leader you can be. And who better to inspire you than our guest today, Dr. Paul Bailo, a globally renowned leader in digital transformation, growth strategy, and innovation. With experience spanning Fortune 500 giants like Apple, Google, MasterCard, Amex, and GE, Paul has shaped enterprise change across industries and geographies. He's currently a professor at Columbia, NYU, Yale, and Cornell, teaching digital strategy, transformation, and analytics. He's also a published author, keynote speaker, and entrepreneur. His latest venture is Landit.ai, an AI-based learning platform for job applicants to master interviews. Today, he joins us to share his experiences and insights on the art of leadership. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Art, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Great to see you, and I'm so glad you joined us. And, I just have to say, wow, you've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Yeah, it's fun, right?
A lot of good. And I've always been impressed how you've transitioned from such a versatile career in corporate to leverage your knowledge to a career in academia. And you've used your experiences to both educate and motivate young people to pursue their own careers in business. I think we'd all be interested in knowing how you do all that. What's the
secret sauce?
Yeah, exactly. Secret sauce.
Yeah. So what I try to do is I've always trained my brain. Like a lot of people go to the gym after work, right? So I would go through my executive career during the day, but I would always at night want to teach. So I've created like a symbiotic relationship in my own mind where I can't work without teaching. I can't teach without work. So mentally, I don't see myself as a professor, even though I hold the title of professor and I hold a PhD. I think of myself more as a mentor trying to create disciples to change the world. So I try to envision this as there's so much going out in the world. And I think if I could just change people's minds just a little bit, I believe I can make the world a better place at the highest level. And I think what happens in the academic world is that there's a lot of theory, but not a lot of practice. And what I really try to do is bring the business world into the classroom with real life examples. So it's not theoretical, it's not case study. It's literally, this is what happened to me last week in the boardroom, or this is what happened with a client, or this is really what's going on. So I find my moral obligation with my life is to share what I could share to change the world through my students. My vision is to have at least 30 seconds of my voice in their heads for the rest of their lives. And if I have 30 seconds of my voice and my teaching in their heads, I think I've accomplished what I was supposed to be doing in the world today. So I'm really almost like trying to create little disciples because there's so much angst in the world and there's so much pain in the world and work is tough for a lot of people. And I just think it's my way of trying to get all these little pebbles out of people's shoes and make the world a better place. So I'm trying to train the next level of leadership to make them successful and the people that they are going to be leading much more happier in the work environment. That's sort of my discipline over the last 20 years. And that's what drives me.
That's a fantastic mission. And one of the things we're looking to highlight is the concept of purpose-driven leadership. I think you've really articulated that very well, that there's a bigger purpose here, and who better to be the disciples than people coming out of school that have a whole career ahead of them.
Absolutely. And I get a lot out of it too, right? So my takeaway is really to keep my brain sharp and wired, right? So it's a symbiotic relationship between my executive career and the academic world. But when I'm in the academic world, it's like sharpening the knife. It's really just keeping your brain really sharp because the discussions and just trying to keep everything really sharp and up to date mentally, from leadership to AI to technology. Even just last night, I had a wonderful conversation with my grad students on ethics and AI. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. And you could just hear a pin drop in the class, right? Everyone's getting it, right? And that keeps my brain sharp, it keeps their brain sharp, and it's a symbiotic relationship between both parties.
We could probably have a whole session just on AI ethics
Oh,
by
yeah.
itself, because I've been dealing with clients and everyone's trying to grasp it, especially since there's a lack of standards and precedents out there. But one of the things that struck me is how many people aren't even addressing that. Just focus, hey, how do I develop the next unicorn? And they don't look at the other side of the coin and say, well, is this unicorn going to turn into one of these Marvel monsters or something?
Right. Well, the funny part was last night in developing the leadership model in AI ethics, and they're all struggling, right? Because they're trying to pull from their value system. But the model is that there is nowhere to pull from because you have to write it. You're the leaders. You're going to have to write the laws. The government regulations and the legality are so far behind. And this is where leadership comes in. And it finally occurred to them that they're going to have to write this. It's who they are and what they believe are the guiding principles of what they're going to have to create in the world of AI ethics. It's a leadership model that doesn't exist that they're going to have to create. And that's what makes leadership so interesting, right? It's really who you are. So a good leader spends a lot of time understanding the emotion and how that transfers into behavior, how that behavior then transforms into action. Top-notch employees are behavior based. A student who gets straight A's understands the behavior in order to get straight A's. A student who gets D's only understands that behavior of how you get D's until they learn new behavior. As a leader, young leaders look at the behavior, and in my experience, they fail to look at the emotion. If you don't understand the emotional premise of why this person's behaving this way, you're never going to solve it. You have to really understand, why is this person, why is this group, why is this division acting this way? If you just look at the behavior and not the emotion, you're never going to be successful.
So let me ask you this, putting yourself in the academic
Mm,
context, you have these very talented students in your class, consistently get straight A's. They're about to enter the business world. They all want to be successful
sure.
leaders, but they haven't really
Mhm,
received the training
mhm,
in academia that you've talked about on how
mhm,
to recognize behaviors, how to
mhm,
recognize emotions and respond to emotions.
mhm,
So, what can these new graduates
mhm,
start to do in the
mhm,
real world
mhm.
to develop and hone those skills?
Sure. Spend time with yourself.
Mhm.
The first thing is, I think people have gone through the academic world, and I think the academic world doesn't do a good job really of helping people discover who they are. I think what most people, young people, need to do is spend some time with the person that they should love the most and understand the most, which is themselves. And to really understand, why do they do certain things? What is it that they're doing this for? What is that emotional trigger they're doing it for? And then understand, does that drive the result that they expected or need? So it's really a self evaluation of themselves. That would be really the first thing before you jump in to say, I'm a leader and you have a team, because you have to really understand yourself and understand the behaviors and the feelings that you're going through. And that will help you understand other people in the group and what they may be going through.
I think that's a great insight. I've heard a lot of people refer to this as self-actualization.
Could be.
Re-
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
understanding yourself, understanding what you're good at, understanding what you're not good
Hmm.
at. So
Hmm.
someone once told to me, say that knowledge is knowing what you know, and
Hmm.
wisdom is knowing what you don't know.
Yes. And no one knows everything, right?
No,
And no
no
one
one
knows
knows
everything.
everything. And I think
Yeah.
therein lies a key to leadership is recognizing that you need a team that has skills and perspectives
Hmm.
that you don't have to basically round things
Hmm.
out and accomplish a big goal. You
Hmm.
can't do it by
Can't
yourself.
do it yourself. So the other thing I would suggest is one, really understand who you are and really understand what's driving you. And if you don't, stop and try to figure it out. Because I think a lot of people in my class shouldn't be there. I think they're just on this track and they shouldn't be on the track. I think they should really stop and say, yep, this is what I should really do. Second thing is you have to realize that leadership is not about you. And this is the hardest part for people to digest. Leadership is about the other person. How do you make this other person successful? And this is egotistical, right? You have to remove the ego from yourself and understand, how am I going to make that person successful? It has to do with the people around you. And do they want to help you be successful? Do they want to do the job, right? Do you understand what's driving them and how to feed them? Or is it really just about you? And then you wonder why no one wants to work with you. Because leadership has nothing to do about you. It has to do with everyone else on the team. If you ever watched the movie Ben-Hur, and Ben-Hur comes out of the desert and he sees these beautiful white stallions, absolutely beautiful. And they're trying to practice the stallions to run a chariot race. And he goes and says, look, you're never going to win because this horse is on the inside. That horse has to go to the outside. This horse has to go into the middle. You have to understand yourself so that you can understand the people around you and put them in the position that allows them to be successful.
You know, you mentioned that sometimes you can look at a class and say, okay, these people are a good fit
Hmm.
for management, for leadership.
Hmm.
Other people are not. What are the characteristics or traits or signals
Sure.
that let you determine which is which?
So I do an experiment at Columbia with all my students, and a good friend of mine is in my class with me, Sue Young. She's been with me 8 years. And the first thing I do is I have everyone settle down in the class. Sue Young films them sitting down. And then I yell at them. I say, get out of my classroom. I say nothing but get out of my classroom. So they come in, they sit, we take a picture of them, and then we start videotaping. And all they're settled in and everything, and I ask them to leave. And they're all puzzled and confused, and then they leave. And then 3 minutes later, I ask them to come back. And then I explain to them what happened. 99.99% of the time, they sit in the exact same chair. There's 100 chairs in the room. They get to pick any chair they wanted. And the people who pick the same chair, their minds are not wired for change.
Mhm.
That 1.00% of the person who changes their chair, that person understands that life is about change. And that person has a higher propensity of being a good leader because they understand that I have an opportunity to change things. I've been doing this for almost 8, 9 years. Everyone sits in the same chair.
99% of the people do not have the seeds to be a good leader.
They're not thinking, they're basically on autopilot.
Okay. And how could someone change that?
Sure.
Let's say I recognize I
Yeah.
have self awareness to say, okay, that's
Yeah.
a problem I have. How do I get out of
Sure. There's two fundamental rules that most people have to understand. I believe there's only two constants in the world, and this is how I live my life. People are constantly looking for unconditional love, be it in a classroom, belonging to a school, belonging to a team. Everyone wants to belong to something, right? They all want, that's why some people want to belong to gangs, people want to join clubs. Everyone has to belong to something. So, my belief after years of research is one thing that will constantly be with us now and forever is the search for unconditional love. The second is constant change. Every minute, every second, we're changing. So, these two things combined, if you understand these two things, make you highly, highly successful as a leader because your job as a leader is to change things, to position people in environments to make them successful, but in an area of love, not to hurt them, not to put them on too much stress, but to understand that you are here to make them a better person, to make them highly productive, to make them a better thinker and understanding you're doing this in a safe environment. When you look at success, one of the most successful animals in the world is a dog. Why? Because they allow us to come into our house. They allow us to protect them. They get food from us. They get an exorbitant amount of love and kindness from people around them, and they're a dog. They're a wild animal that was a wolf, and they trained us to fall in love with them. They are highly successful. People who are light and kind far outseed people who are mad or angry or only out for themselves. A lot of times you hear about all the negativity of leadership and all these crazy people doing crazy things. But the most successful people are the people like dogs, who are kind, who are honest, who keep coming back even if maybe you kicked them when you had a bad day. That dog always comes back. When someone's down or someone's hurting, do you take the little pebbles out of their shoes? In my class, what I do after I kick them out of the class, the second week, what I do to them is I give them a pebble. I've given out thousands of these pebbles. And for the entire class, I ask them to put this in their shoe and walk home with it. Because those pebbles, if they're not removed over a long period of time, will cause your leg to be amputated. Leadership is about removing these pebbles. And the people that we're talking about will someday be in the position to remove these pebbles for all these people. And that's really what you're trying to do. How do you help them grow more than they think they can grow? How do you push them out of their comfort level? How do you change them to be really good leaders in themselves? This is contradictory to what most people think, right? I'm happy if you're more successful than me. That makes me happy, right? But that's not really the current mentality. The current mentality in most places is what's in it for me.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to explore that a little bit further. And by the way, I love your metaphor about dogs because I'm a
Mhm,
big dog lover.
mhm,
So I think
mhm. They've mastered
yeah,
leadership.
that's a great example. But, let's talk about expectations because you're right. I mean, if you look out there, people, whether they're newly graduated students or they're in middle management, I think everyone's getting mixed signals because there's so much noise out there. It seems like the people who are the noisiest get the most attention. The people who are the meanest or the edgiest get the most impressions. And the people who are the biggest successes get all the congratulations
Mhm,
and all the applause. Yeah, and I think it sets an expectation that someone could graduate aspiring to be a leader or in
mhm,
the business community,
mhm,
and they feel, well, I can't do that, or I don't want to do that, or
mhm,
it's unreachable, it's unapproachable.
mhm,
I mean, how do you address those expectations and make people realize, gee, there are things you can start to do on
mhm,
a daily basis to adopt a leadership style that's consistent with your values and
mhm,
is going to create a community of better people, better
mhm.
caring.
So first thing is know yourself. You said it, right? With your own values. I don't think people really evaluated their values. My approach is really start thinking about yourself and what do you stand for? What is it that you could really stand for that no one's going to change? And do you have institutions that you support this belief? So if people are religious, right? They go to church or they go to synagogue or they go to mosque, right? This is a supporting structure to support your beliefs. The question really is then how do you work your own personal beliefs into a system to make other people successful? I'm not saying convert them to Judaism or Catholic, but you have to have your own fundamental belief. You have to believe you can do it because if you don't believe you can do it, it's never going to happen.
Mhm.
So it all starts here. There's no different than people who are CEOs than you or me or anyone else. We're all equal. But what you have to believe is that you can do a better job than that person. And not because you're better or anything. You just may have better methodologies and different theories and different stories and different ways of getting things done. So young people, what they need to do is first do self-evaluation. Think about Why are they doing this? Do they really want to do this? Because if they're interested in just making money, there's 100,000 other ways to make money. Two, if you're really not interested in making people great, you're not going to be a great leader. It's just not the way it works, right? You can have positional power, or you apply for a job and you're the manager, but you're not going to be happy, right?
Who have been some of the role models that have really inspired you?
So the number one role model is really who from a personal standpoint is obviously my father, right? So my father was very, very smart. He was an MBA, CPA, and he worked for a major accounting firm, but he never made it to partner, right? But he was brilliant. And I remember him coming home one day and he says, "Yeah, not gonna make me partner because I'm helping too many people." And my father goes, "Look, you hire all these young people, you don't train them, you don't educate them, they have all these questions. Someone has to help them." Now, my father would go to mass every day with my mother, right? So they're very, very religious. So he basically said, "Look, my job is to help all these young accountants, right? Who got out of school, help them get their CPA." But in retrospect, he should have been the CEO because he had the right belief system. And the funniest part was is they said, "Well, okay, you're not going to make partner, go find a new job." So he said, "All right, great. I found a new job." And I remember coming home, I was like, "Yeah, I don't want to work 5 days a week anymore. I'm going to work 4 days a week." So he worked for this other firm for like 20 years, 4 days a week. Then as he got older, 3 days a week. But he helped a lot of people. And people to this day always told him, he was a Boy Scout leader, and people just always loved my dad because he understood it's not just about the job, it's about the people in those jobs and how do you make them successful. Now, people who've really trained me very well is I used to work for the Federal Reserve, but I would work nonstop. And I remember Glenn, who's a good friend of mine, he basically said, "Look, it's not about the work. It's really about the people." And I had to stop and think about this because I was just on my way, right? I was just pushing and pushing, being a street kid from New York City, just saying, "I'm going to outwork everyone. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my degrees. I'm just going to push." And I remember at the Federal Reserve, he says, "Look, it's not about the process, it's about the people." And at that moment, I realized my thinking
Mhm.
just shifted. And I was responsible as a management consultant working for the Federal Reserve to do some pretty high level stuff. I was given this area in upstate New York that no one wanted to help out. And we went from no one wanting to help build this new system that I wanted to put into place to people lining up out my door wanting to come help. So how did we go from no one to a whole line of people? Because I helped the people on the first run, begging and borrowing them to come and made it all about them. I made sure that they were rewarded for coming up and working really hard with me. I made sure that managers knew it. And basically, that was a pivotal moment in my own leadership style to say, okay, it may take me longer to get where I want, but after I get them where I want, the acceleration process will be through the roof.
Mhm.
So I could always figure out how I'm going to get from point A to point B, but I was moving so fast that most people couldn't keep up. So I had to slow down a little bit in order to speed up to make sure the people were all okay. And Glenn actually really taught me this at the Federal Reserve. And it was a great experience. He even nominated me to go to Georgetown. The president of the Federal Reserve signed off on me going to Georgetown. I was only there for 6 months, and I spent 3 years getting a graduate certificate from Georgetown Sonia School of Banking, graduating with honors, because they could see my brain going and realizing it's all about the people. And that's really what helped me to think about this. And also, I always work for PhDs. So everywhere I worked at GE or the Federal Reserve, American Express, the leaders all had PhDs. And I said, wow, okay, I could build this transition from, the executive room to academics and go get the PhD. And my PhD is international management and innovation, but I use this both on the executive end and also on the academic end. It's a wonderful degree to have, especially the independent research, getting the PhD. I recommend all leaders get PhDs because it trains your brain in a way that it's never been trained before. I could pick up stuff in the readings that most people can't because after 7 years of just doing research, it's natural now. It comes very natural for me to see things that most people can't see.
Those are fantastic insights. And, I think some of the key takeaways that I've heard is, you have to know yourself if you want to be a great leader. You have to recognize that leadership isn't about you, it's about the people. Those are two of the key
Mhm,
takeaways that I heard that
mhm,
people should start to apply in
mhm.
their day to day work as a leader.
And it's understandable that the third thing I would say, it's okay to forgive yourself. You're going to make mistakes. I mean, this is what it's all about. We all make mistakes. We all try our best. And sometimes you're going to hurt people because you're playing with live ammunition. And you got to be ready. You got to be prepared, but you got to take the risk, right? But the hardest part really is just do it. Believe you could do it and you could add value, but make sure it's about the other person, not necessarily about you.
Yeah. Paul, I think that's a great way to sum it up. One last thing I'd like to ask you is how do people follow you?
The easiest way is just go to my LinkedIn, Paul Bailo on LinkedIn. And you can also take a look at landit.ai, which is a new company we started, which is a AI interview prep. And it's also really, really, landit.ai is very interesting because it's all about emotional intelligence. We use AI to make you a better human, which is really pretty funny, right? So most people use AI to fire people. We're using AI to make you a better human so that when you're interviewing, it's on an emotional intelligence level. But if people want to find me, just look me up on LinkedIn and happy to chat because once again, I have students who I've taught many, many years ago, and I would just get random emails and say, "Hey, Dr. Bell, you got a chance? I want to talk to you." So anyone who comes to my classes, I'm readily available to them, no matter how long ago the class was.
Well, Paul, with that, I think we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah, thanks, Art.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing all those insights with us. I truly believe you inspired our audience to become purpose driven leaders, which is
Mhm.
what we want. And most of all, I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. So until our next Leadership Art podcast episode, this is your host, Art Robbins. And remember, it's your lead.